Howdy, welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Unknown Secrets of Internet Marketing. I am your host, Matt Bertram. For those of you watching, MatthewBertram.com is what I'll get launched next year as far as like the coaching program going. And also, I'm going to be having some new handles come out. Any of you watching still see the old podcast cover. So we do have a new podcast cover, so be looking out for that. I didn't really want my face so big on it, but it is on there. Look for internet marketing real big if you're looking for it, or if you haven't been listening in a while. But we're going to be rocking and rolling next year. We're going to have a lot of stuff going. If you see it, internetmarketingsecrets.com, internet marketing secrets hashtag is where we're going to be found starting next year. Got a great guest for you today to continue the conversation on the degradation of and changes in click volume online, how you have to be other places. I got RJ Schultz with me here from Blip Billboards. Hey, RJ, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing well, Matt. It's good to be here.
You know, one of the things that we were talking about was that rule that Google came out with, the 7, the 11, the 4 rule, right? Like, and really, anybody that's been in digital marketing for a while knows, 7 times people got to hear your sound, your information. I think with the proliferation of ads everywhere, that number's probably gone up quite a bit. Actually 11. So sorry, 11, but 7 hours. And I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. And that's why I really believe in long form content, is someone's got to consume 7 hours of your content. Okay. To actually know, like, and trust and do business with you. And one of the best ways to reach somebody doing that is through podcasting or long form content. But tell us a little bit about yourself. I love what your company's doing. I love how you're disrupting the space, and we can start the conversation maybe with the 7-11-4 rule. So
okay, yeah, 7-11-4. I think it's the evolution of what we all heard growing up, going to school. People need to see you a bunch of times, 7 or 8 times before they're ready to decide to choose you. Google put some research into this a year and a half ago and published what they call 7-11-4, and 7 hours, like you mentioned, 11 interactions across those 7 hours, and most effective when those interactions happen across 4 different platforms. And so that's really what we at Blip have been teaching our clients or our users to implement in their full funnel marketing. It's like you've got to get to where your target audience is and be part of their daily life. You need to be giving them content that helps them feel better at their jobs and connecting 11 times over 7 hours in 4 different places. And we found that as we took that approach, like, we just started to see all the key metrics.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks so much to what we've been also doing internally. Like, so we've known, right, that 7-11 touch points, like, I think 11, yeah, that's about the right number. I think it's maybe even a little bit higher. The 7 hours, we've been talking about that. I put that in my book like years ago, Build Your Brand Mania. How do you reach that? What's the most effective way to reach that number? Even in Know, Like, Trust, I talk about that. The 4 different channels, that's something we've seen. We've seen AdWords not work very effectively. I think it's oversaturated, especially since COVID. We've pushed people out to Bing, DuckDuckGo, which is pretty easy. You got AI and AI chat happening, but we've really pushed out our clients to run branded campaigns, visibility campaigns on multiple channels, and kind of spraying that out, kind of blue ocean strategy. We're seeing that too. When people are hearing you on multiple channels, that comes together. So this study, I'm going to put that link in the show notes for everybody too, because we follow the EAT metric as well that Google put out there, the expertise, authority, trust. They added the experience component to that. And so I love that. Tell me a little bit about your background. I know we were talking about some veteran stuff before this as well. Just kind of, how did you come to this evolution with Blip?
Great question, man. I am absolutely a business transplant. I never thought that I'd be starting companies or running companies or working in companies at all. I spent the first part of my professional life in the government, and I thought that might be where I spend the my whole life.
Yeah.
Right. So I went to undergrad and studied aeronautical science, concurrently got a pilot's license, and then joined out of school. I joined an intelligence program that was affiliated with the Army, the U.S. Army, and went straight into 3 years of training. And so for 3 years, like I was absent, and I emerge 26, 27 years old, still never having even worked a real job. You know what I mean? Just so far from the wisdom of the world, so to speak. And went operational and had a lot of fun. I got to see some of the world that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And even over the past couple of years, it's been cool to see some of those same places, but through a different lens, like as a tourist or, for this type of work. And it's been a lot of fun. But I started having kids and decided that that is not where I wanted to be long term. In fact, when my first son was 3, I was home. I was gone a lot, but I was home and we were playing like cars on the floor. He's like, "Dad, this is fun." And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, I think so too, man. This is great." And he's like, "Next time, I want to do it at your house." And I was like, "Oh man, like my son doesn't even think I live here." You know what I mean? And so that truly was the impetus for me to start looking beyond government work. And I just went straight to like the Google search bar and I was like, "What's next? What can I do? What do people who leave this line of work end up pursuing?" And I settled on business school. And so went to business school. And during business school, well, actually in the government, I applied to a program called like McKinsey and Company's Emerging Scholars. And I became a semi-finalist there. And so got onto campus and continued into those activities and thought like, yeah, this is going to be great. Once I get there, I'm like, this is not going to be great. This is absolutely not what I want to do. Like, no way. This is just another place to, well, I mean, I won't disparage that publicly because it's a fantastic route. Consulting is a fantastic route, but I really I became enamored with the idea of starting and working on new ventures through some classes I was taking. And so after that, after school, I went to Amazon in Seattle and worked on an emerging markets team. And that fed the beast a little bit more. And after a year or so, many of us were looking around thinking like, why are we doing this for someone else? Like, let's go do this ourselves. And so I left Amazon for a younger company. I think I arrived at their Series B. So it was another educational couple of years for me to see a company grow from 20 million to 100 million plus. And I left that for Blip, which was even smaller, like way smaller. And so that's been the evolution of things, and it's been a fun ride, that is for sure.
So to just educate everybody, it was new to me as well. So Blip is digital billboards where you can basically buy at certain times, like just fractionally, right? It's kind of like a fractional, like Uber of billboards, right? Like, tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, and when I hear digital billboards, and when you guys hear digital billboards, you're probably thinking the same thing I thought when this job opportunity like came up. I'm like, billboards, like, where's the time machine to take me back to the 50s? Like, I do not want to spend my career around this medium. But you're right, it's an Uber style marketplace, right? And so it's best understood using Uber as a proxy. You got Uber is a scheduling algorithm. It's a piece of technology in a two-sided marketplace. It sits between car owners and car riders, but Uber does not ride. They do not own cars. We're the same. We're a scheduling algorithm that sits between board owners, billboards, car toppers, wallscapes, whatever, and people who advertise. And we don't own billboards and we don't advertise. We just connect the two through an open exchange. So the value proposition is, with Uber, you can get a $15 ride from the airport instead of a $50,000 car that you're now stuck with. With us, you can pay whatever you want to pay for a week advertising in Times Square instead of figuring out who owns that board and then going onto a multi-year contract and spending millions of dollars to get into Times Square. So it's, a lot more control with the spend that you have. And the big value is it allows us SMBs to play in out of home, because before we don't have the runway, the purse, the budget to, accept these big contracts as part of our marketing expense.
Well, yeah, we were talking about like conferences, right? Like all the different billboards when someone gets off a plane off of like certain routes, right? Like to be so nimble to be able to be at the right time to reach the right people when you have the density that you're looking for, or different kind of events. I mean, tell me a little bit about like use cases as well as like, is it a bid auction? Like how does it work?
Yeah, so it's the second place bid auction. Use cases are really interesting. Interesting for us in particular because it's not something that we went out and championed. We just kind of put our heads down, built, went to work, and then came up for air and started to look at the customer data to tell us what people were doing with it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's kind of cool. So you have everything from a proud parent who wants to tell the small town they live in that their son or daughter just graduated high school and they'll leave that up for a week. We've got an interesting use case is like musicians, mainly rappers. They'll plot their tour locations, their tour map, and then they'll buy up billboards in those cities a month prior, and they'll just pepper their tour path for ticket sales, right? And like you mentioned, it gives them that control, that geo control over locations, which is something people find a lot of value in, and we see used pretty widely. You got use cases like that all the way up to Berkshire Hathaway and Keller Williams, these big real estate groups who have multiple locations all over and need to shift focus from one place to the other for whatever reason. And Amazon Prime that spends a ton of money. So,
well, I mean, I just like the democratization, of now you have these media channels that you can reach people that before you might have to have a huge budget to be able to do it, and huge relationships, huge contracts to reach these people. I mean, they're opening up Disney Plus and Amazon and Netflix, all these bid auction places, right? So you can build a strategy where you're hitting those multiple touch points and staying in front of people. I think that digital billboards, a lot of times when I think about it, I think about like, well, that's what display ads are, right? Like our digital billboards chasing around on your phone. You're talking about digital billboards, like on billboards, like out there, like anything that's digital that you see it changing. Yeah. How do you connect that whole network, right? So that's what you're doing. You're bringing that together and collecting that inventory. I think it's just a phenomenal way to get more reach. I mean, the world today with even social media and how TikTok changed the algorithm. I mean, one post, you can reach millions of people, right? You can, a post in Reddit, is bigger than a traditional press release, right? Now you're able to incorporate that traditional, like if they're not on their phone, they're walking around looking at something. And the more digital billboards there are, the more you can kind of build out what that experience is, right? And so I think that there's going to be a lot of evolution of this, of, even like VR and like the, like everything connecting, I guess, and how augmented reality, that's where I was going. Sorry. I was like VR, I was like really augmented reality and Google glasses, and like how everything's going to be an experience. And even like what I'm seeing in the art is digital billboards, big digital billboards are part of it all. And if you have access to reach people in that way, and you need to touch them on multiple touch points, multiple times, like this should be a tool in everyone's arsenal is really the way I thought about it. And when I saw what you were doing and military background and everything, I was like, let's talk, like, tell me more about it. I mean, what can you share any interesting insights into some of the data, maybe expound upon the 7-11-4 rule with Google? Like, how are you seeing it pulled through? And how are you seeing people use maybe multimedia, like, or different channels? What's their marketing mix and how they're incorporating this into it? I just really want to hear kind of use cases, because I just think it's super fascinating. Like smart marketing, right? Like, let's talk about smart marketing.
Absolutely. I think the message, the answer to all that is a few fold, and then I'll break these down. But it's like, people need to be conditioned before they're ready to choose you. They need to know something and they need to feel something. And those somethings are pretty defined by the interested parties, right? So people need to know something, they need to feel something. And the question for a marketer whose job is to drive demand is like, how do I most effectively move a person from unaware along that path to knowing something and feeling something such that they're ready to purchase? And I think the key is to point appropriate advertising mediums at them, depending on where they are along that 7-11-4, pathway or journey to you, right? And so that's what I think it is, and that's what we call smart marketing, right? What's the most efficient and effective way to condition your audience or to develop your audience to get what's called qualified impressions, and we push that smart marketing centers on this concept of qualified impressions, QI. This is something, it's a proprietary term. It's something that we've been using internally, because one thing we struggled with early on was convincing people to choose billboards as part of their mix. The first objection is like, no, I don't want to use billboards. I'm already using this. And we're always like, we're not asking you to stop using that and start using billboards, right? Yeah. We're asking you to make more effective or more efficient at the top of your funnel. My favorite study ever, and I have to say, I cannot find it anywhere on the internet anymore. Back in 2020, I took some absent time. I'm still affiliated with the government and like a I own you reserve capacity type thing. So in 2020, I spent like 9 months in Syria. And when I came back, like this thing was gone. I could not find it anywhere. But before I left, I was just championing this thing. And I remember the details well. So McDonald's launched a menu item in 5 cities. These were DMAs like Dallas, Oklahoma City, that type of thing. They launched a menu item in 5 cities. In all 5 cities, they did 6 weeks of Facebook advertising. In 4 of the 5 cities, they layered billboards on top of the Facebook for the same period, same 6 weeks. And those 4 cities combined to outperform in sales the control city by 729%. And that's the message we have, right? Like, utilize the full funnel marketing approach so that you can create those meaningful touch points for your target audience. Because like you mentioned, degradation, like nothing I say is absolute, right? Digital marketing in some ways is becoming degraded. It really is, because you show an ad to someone 5 times, it doesn't know who you are yet, and you're trying to develop them along that path of 7 hours and 11 touch points and 4 different platforms. Well, if they don't know who you are yet and they swipe your ad away, or they spend no time with it, they don't engage with it, the algorithm is not likely to show it to that person again. So you are just wasting money, and a lot of times at a very high CPM, $14 to $18 on Facebook, for example, to no avail, right? And so like the whole message is use the full funnel. I'm super interested in, and we have a couple of professors at a few local universities, Brigham Young University being the main one in Utah, researching this for us, because it's like, why did those 4 cities outperform the control city by 729%? And I am super interested in that, because it brings into question the psychology of survival, which deals a lot with my background. And essentially what we're saying there is, when you are served an ad on your phone and you're like on the toilet, or you're playing chess, or you're scrolling Instagram, or whatever you do on your phone, you're not in shop mode, and you swipe that away, and very rarely do you tune in and like give it an honest look. Mm-hmm. But when you're confronted by a billboard for 8 seconds, like it's forever, and that was only 2 seconds, right? You're forced to psychologically ingest colors, logos, maybe a couple words, even if you're driving in a daze, right? You're forced to psychologically ingest those things, so the next time it surfaces on your phone, at the subconscious level, your fight or flight kicks in and says like, hey, Matt, we recognize these colors, this logo, this word, they're in the database. Do we need to dwell an extra second to see if it's a benefit or a threat? And the answer is physiologically yes, right? And so that's the differentiator right there. And that's the importance of matching this medium out of home to everything else you're doing down funnel.
Dude, RJ, this is just super interesting. Like, I love the psychology talk of the marketing component of it. I'm really fascinated. I would love to, when you find that study, send that through, or even the research that you find, because I'm here's what I can tell you. I've run a lot of campaigns. The pushback I get is attribution, right? Like, like, how do I convert? I'm spending money on this. I got, CMOs, I got, business owners. Hey, like I'm spending money on this. Like, I want to know where that conversion is, right? And we're a big search marketing company, and Google is kind of like, today is where people are going through some validation, but it gets the attribution a lot because it's the last click. Okay. It's not the first click. That starts on social media. That starts on billboards. That starts somewhere else that the demand gets created, right? And what I've seen on a lot of campaigns is like radio. I've done a lot of radio stuff, right? Whether it be streaming radio, whether it be terrestrial radio. And we see brand lift like heavy, right? People are searching for the name Google likes that, right? They want to work with brands. There's a trust factor associated with that. I like this fight or flight instinct. I have not gone down that rabbit hole enough, and I would love to expand upon that in our conversation. If you have more to add to that, I can just tell you, when I look at the marketing channels we put together, what is the end goal? The attribution, it just should be like, okay, like an average weight across them all, whatever. But what is the result of what it's pushing? Whether it be like, influence, whether it be like the bottom line sales, whatever it have you, like all these things combined give you a multiplier effect. And I like that you have to be confronted with something before you make a decision. I think that there's a trust component too, that when you see something on a billboard, like there's established like a feeling of like permanence, right? That's a legit company that's up on that billboard.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With ads, you can just see ads. And I think to your point too, you can run that ad and hit that same person over and over again, and they're just going to keep swiping away that this is not interesting to me. So you have to hit them at a different vertical, a different angle with a different message to try to get it into their subconscious to actually, like, that's why the taglines are so important, to get them to actually open the ad or read beyond that, because they're hit with so much. And that's kind of what I gutly think some of it is like, man, there's some permanence associated with this. That message might be a little bit different, but it approaches and hits them, like you said, at a different time of what they're doing, that puts it in their subconscious in a different way. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
I mean, to anyone listening today, say it out loud in your car or whatever, but like, what do you read on a Chick-fil-A billboard?
Yeah.
Right? Eat more chicken. It's like the quintessential billboard campaign that does exactly what you're talking about. Hits them from a different angle, stays in their mind. It's very authoritative. It's very consistent, and it's very trustworthy. But, billboards are just that. And not to mention relatively cheap, right? And if you broke down what what smart marketing looks like, it's like you think about this pathway with 7 steps or 11 steps that people need to stand on at one point in time to start building trust with you. It's like, how do you deliver those 11 meaningful touch points across this journey from when they don't know you to them, being ready to buy? And billboards have their place, right? It's not just do billboards until they see you 11 times. It's like, use out of home for awareness, maybe those first 2, 3, 4 impressions, because it's accessible, it's efficient, and it's authoritative, right? One thing we worry about with digital advertising, Facebook Meta, for example, is like, are our ads being served to people or to bot accounts? Because man, that's an expensive thing to just deal with, right? But with billboards, you can be sure that it's an actual set of eyes that's seeing that ad, right? So first couple of impressions, billboards. Next couple impressions, maybe 3, 4, like 5, 6, 7. Keep the billboards going, and then start to mix in some of your own, your own content, the stuff that you're doing online, podcasts, things like that, so that when people listen to a podcast or they're fed an online ad, they can start to make the connections with the things that they're seeing out on the freeway and out in the city, things like that. And then once you're sure that a large enough percentage of some area has seen your ad 6, 7 times, be okay layering in that expensive, one-to-one digital call to action with a meta ad or the like. And so that's where we've tried to play in the last year, and that's what we're rolling out. What we've rolled out about 6 months ago is, there are multiple brains at the decision table in any company, right? And one half of the table is like performance marketing, attribution. I need to know how many dollars we're putting in and how many dollars we're getting out. And that's a hard thing to prove with brand marketing, with brand advertising, right? Yeah. And you'll see a lot of companies plateau. They'll stall because that mentality will prevail. It'll win the day, and they'll pump more money into paid ads, and they'll do things they can track because they want to show each other and their board, like, this is our growth, you know what I mean? But you got brands that have figured it out. Liquid Death, Locally Kizik, some of these brands that everyone knows about, because they're such good brand marketers. And so we've tried to determine, how can we speak to both heads so that they can believe, they can agree on something at that decision table. And that's where we came up with what we call QI, qualified impressions. It's going to be a disservice to force your marketers to try and bring one-to-one attribution to a billboard, right? But what we can do with government data, with Geopath and all this stuff we know about our demographics in our cities in the United States, we can run a statistical model that will say with a relative degree of certainty, this is how many people have seen your ad X number of times based on the length of time your ad has been up, how many times you show it, like how much, how many boards in the same area, stuff like that. And so you can buy, say, a million impressions from a billboard company, and they'll say, hey, yep, this has been seen 1 million times. Here's the proof that it's up on that board, and then you're done. But with us, we go 2 steps further to try and speak to both of those brains at the strategy table. Come buy the 1 million impressions, and say it's in Salt Lake City. That's where we're headquartered. So I use that as an example. Say it's in Salt Lake City. We'll be able to say, hey, this is not 1 million people. This is 272,000 people. 9,000 of whom have seen it 1 time, 11,000 of whom have seen it twice, 43,000 saw it 3 times, and so on and so forth. And so we can produce this statistical bell curve that shows, all right, a critical mass of people in this area have seen your ad more than 4 times. It's time to feel okay layering on that expensive digital marketing because they're primed. They know you. They're ready to go. And then the third thing we can do in that same scenario for the same customers to say, when we do have a critical mass of people who have seen you, 4 or 5 times, we can help you by retargeting. So we'll put a geofence through a partner, put a geofence around either your store or our board. And then anytime they drive through, we can shoot a mobile ad right to their device. And so this is our answer. This idea of qualified impressions is our answer to that. Why can't I, give proper attribution to billboards? Well, let's give us something we can track and measure, and that's a qualified impression. And so I'll end that little rant with a quick definition of what a qualified impression is. And a qualified impression is an impression delivered to someone who has seen you at least 6 times. If you deliver an impression to someone who's seen you once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, or 6 times, or 4 or 5 times, that's a general impression. But the impression becomes qualified once they've seen you 6 times, because now you can feel really good about the trust that you've started to build and really good about spending a little bit more on the digital front to convert these customers.
No, I love that. I mean, the data I've seen is anytime even you're running digital ads, you got to wait about 2 weeks to see any kind of real data. You got to hit them a few times to let it soak into the psyche, and one of the things that we mentioned previously that I think is worth bringing up, and I think this is a great time for the call, at least in my journey, it's interesting because certain people are brought to you at different times, right? You think it might be serendipitous, but there's probably something to that. But at the conference, the Brighton conference that I was at, the keynote speakers all talked about how click volume is going down and how you need to build a brand, right? And build it on other people's platforms, build it everywhere you can, but build it in the mind, right, of your target customer. It doesn't need to be on your. Now, email does great. Okay. Email still crushes it. Okay. And I think everybody said it was going to die for a long time, but a lot of people talk about, hey, you got to build it on your own property. You never know how these social media platforms are going to change things. I mean, they're starting to become more like public utilities to a certain degree. And I think that they're going to be around, and any of the rules are probably good for the whole, and you should navigate around those, but you should be everywhere, right? You should be everywhere, and you should be building your brand in the mind of the client. And it shouldn't matter on the click, right? It shouldn't matter on the attribution. If you know that they're seeing it, because that is the issue. I mean, there's even companies out there that their whole job is they get a percentage of ad spend to get out all the bots, right? And this one company I was talking to, you had to spend $1 million, and they charged 1% of the ad spend to basically get rid of all the bots. Well, if you have to spend at least $1 million, how many of those clicks are bots and versus real humans, right? So there's all these different components in this complex world on how to reach people. And the right answer is all of them, I believe, right? And this should be a tool in the tool belt. And it really should be looking at, well, do you have enough budget, one, to figure out how many channels you need to be on? Maybe talk to me a little bit about, let's talk about a smaller company and a bigger company, maybe or give me a couple scenarios, how they might incorporate this is that add-on strategy, right? Like not the sole strategy, but an add-on strategy to what they're doing digitally to expand their reach, to expand, the customer base. I've even seen data for some different kind of platforms and different kind of things. Some of these people, like you might be able to reach people in a billboard that aren't on social media, right? Like there's probably a data set of people that are not on some of these social media channels that, well, you're reaching them in the physical world, right? And so just kind of curious how you would structure something like that for big and small companies.
Yeah, good question. A lot of caveats here. So I'll start out by saying, like, everything I would recommend doing starts with who you're targeting, right? So really, really in-depth understanding of where your ICP lives, where they work, what they do, their hopes and dreams, all that, because your company, your brand needs to become part of that world for them, right? And so if in that research you find that your ICP spends time on the road, spends time downtown, or stuff like that, then billboards are an appropriate medium for you to add into the mix at the right time, right?
Their target persona. You got to know your target persona, and a lot of people just start marketing without even thinking through all that stuff. Like, I think that is super critical. Yeah,
absolutely. So in terms of spend for like a small company, and we tell this to people all the time, like very, very bluntly up front, because the last thing we want is for someone to try us for a month and be like, nothing happened. Well, I can tell you right now, nothing is going to happen in a month, right? You need to think about 90 days because you're saturating an area so that people see you multiple times, right? You're trying to have that eat more chicken effect in one particular area so that people can just recall the taste of your product or the feeling they get when they use it or eat it or whatever it is. That's what you're trying to affect, the type of change you're trying to affect, right? And so 90 days, typically pretty safe window. And depending on the size of the city, take Salt Lake, for example, it needs to be between $3,000 and $5,000. That will get you 60% of the population in these DMAs, roughly 60% of the population to see you 6 times. Wow. And so that's just general rule of thumb, but we have tools. You give us your ICP, you tell us where you live and where you want to target, and we'll run it through the tool. But generally it's like 3 to 5K a month for 90 days and you'll start seeing results.
Awesome. So I think this should be a tool in everyone's tool belt. I really thought what you're doing is fascinating. So I'm so glad I had you on and could share you with the audience. Before we go, like, what is one unknown secret of internet marketing that you might not have shared, or if you want to repackage it in a different way, just if someone is like, wanting to take something away, what's the one biggest takeaway, I guess?
And I did share a little bit of this, so let me try and repackage it. But I think it's widely overlooked that even when we say we want to be the most creative company, we want to be in people's minds. Like, just listen to the language there. We. It's all about me. It's all about me. This is what I want to do. This is what I think. And I think the change that has not happened in companies who are struggling or plateauing is that we needs to be changed to they, right? The takeaway is people need to be conditioned. They need to know something and feel something about you before they're ever ready to choose you. So let me say that a different way that's not correct. I need to be as creative as possible and be everywhere they are so that they choose me. Like, that's what we do. That is not right. People need to know something and feel something before they're ready to choose you. And so the question for all of us as marketers is, like, how do I most effectively move these people along that development path of trust toward them being ready to choose me? And the key is to point appropriate advertising mediums at that, at different stages of that path. And I think that's what we all miss. We start with us. We don't start with them nearly enough. Even if we say we do, like, our actions truly do not start with them nearly enough.
Man, I love the psychology. Thank you so much, RJ, for coming on the show. How do people find out more or reach out to you? I know that we got blipbillboards.com is probably like one of the main ways. How else might people find out more about what all this psychology that you're talking about, as well as like your services? Because I'm eating it up myself. So
yeah, the website is the main place. We have a blog there with some of these psychological rants. We also will put in the stuff that we send out here in conjunction with you. like a landing page connected to this podcast for anyone who wants to try this as part of their marketing mix, right? We'll, at offers.blipbillboards.com/podcast, come and create a campaign, and we'll match your spend 25% to get you started.
Well, everyone, I'll put those links in the show notes. If you want to create your own PSYOP in the space, definitely reach out to RJ. Thank you so much for coming on. If anybody really enjoyed this, please share it. Please follow, please subscribe, leave a review. All that interaction helps. Even leave a little emoji or something like that. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to grow your business with the largest, most powerful tool on the planet, the internet, reach out to EWR Digital for more revenue in your business. And until the next time, my name is Matt Bertram. Bye-bye for now.